Hi, welcome to Book Club Babble. Sara Stewart, thank you so much for being with us
Thanks.
today. Sara is the author of Whilst I Was Out, a wonderful, lovely dark comedy. So let's start with, for the readers that haven't read the book, Sara, tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about the book.
Um, I'll start with the book first. That's
Sure,
easier.
sure.
So the book, like you say, is a dark comedy, and it's really about a 40-something woman who is struggling with a very unhappy marriage, a number of small children, and suddenly comes to terms with the fact that actually she's probably gay, and also an alcoholic. So it's quite serious subjects, but tackled in a more light-hearted way, because otherwise it'd be wrist-slitting material. And it tells the story of Alice as she comes out, deals with all the repercussions from that, and then gets sober, but then also has to deal with a relationship with the psycho bitch from hell, as I lovingly call her, which is the sort of main strand of the book. So she's dealing with all these things and then having to sort of relearn how to be an adult, and deal with all these things without the support of alcohol, and deal with this intensely horrible relationship, and actually get back to reality somehow.
Speaking of the psycho bitch from hell, reading about that character was so stressful because she was intense.
Yeah.
How did there was, I think the intensity came from the chemistry that the reader could, it was palpable. The chemistry the sexual chemistry between the two characters. And then there was that when the abuse, when this kind of emotional abuse, enters into the relationship, it's it's intense. How do you even begin to write that? Like how were you inspired to write that? Or
Well, I think it's a question of drawing upon a range of experiences, but then also having spoken to what I discovered was that the police over here actually have a unit where they. I used to think domestic abuse was something that they recognised, but only if it involved physical violence. But now there's a team that recognise the fact that mental abuse
oh,
um,
that's wonderful.
can be as damaging, which is fantastic. And talking to them, it was the fact that so many victims, once they get into this situation where they become, I can't remember the term now, it's not Munchausen by proxy, but that whole where you're a victim, but you allow and you're used to
Right.
your controller, and you don't know anything but that after a while, so you keep coming back to that same situation. And I was fascinated by the fact that, sensible, intelligent, highly intelligent people get themselves into these situations, know that it's wrong, um, and yet keep coming back for more because they think every time it's going to change. And if you keep doing that, I mean, it's madness, literally.
How did you find out about did you do that research beforehand? Or
Yeah, I talked to the police officer who deals with that locally, because I was so impressed by the fact that they actually recognise that mental abuse is as damaging, because obviously you can see bruises, you can see the results of physical violence, but they were actually au fait with the fact that this is a horrible sort of abuse, but a lot of people don't believe them when they're going through these sort of situations. So yeah, I researched it with somebody.
that's really fascinating because I think even though policemen may be aware of that, I think that historically it's been you have to prove it, and how do you prove it? And I think now that they're just so, after making so many calls, they know that along with the pattern of physical abuse, there's always the emotional and psychological abuse. But did they say how they finally, were accountable institutionally, in terms of like, what is it that they can do, or how do they address that?
I think it's very much on a case-by-case basis, because obviously in some instances it's not something that's very easy to prove. So ultimately, in a lot of cases, it's down to each of the victims to actually, with their help, and they provide counselling and all sorts of other support, be it security, if issues, if people are feeling scared, they'll send a security officer around to look at people's homes and help them out with that. But ultimately, I think unless there's palpable proof there isn't something that they can do through the courts of law, but they'll provide every sort of support they can to help that person get away from the perpetrator.
Right. So Alice, our main protagonist, she knows that something is not right with her marriage. And I love how you provide the background details about her mother's homophobia and her reason for never really coming out and saying, nope, I'm going to give this a chance. And then I think the way you write about this kind of liberation, because you really capture the chemistry of those, those first heady months of falling in love. And I think we could all relate to that little honeymoon phase. And then bang, psycho, know. And then you don't know, Alice's character doesn't know how to extricate herself. How have your readers reacted to the component of the novel where you have, a woman in her 40s coming out, and so dealing with divorce, parenting these 3 small children? Did you have readers saying, oh my gosh, I'm going through that myself? Or what has been the reaction by?
I've had that, but what was also interesting, I was asked to go on a program over here on BBC Radio 4, because there's been a lot of stories about women coming out, but it tends to be in the sort of the literati in London, where everything's very cozy and husbands and wives are still very friendly and they all have dinner together. And, there's a lot of very famous authors who write great books who are gay writers, but that isn't really the reality of it for Middle England and probably the rest of the world. I mean, that's a very closeted cotton wool. So I think they asked me on to give the realities of what that sort of experience could be like, and the fact that making those sort of decisions, you have to be very, very certain that it's something that you truly believe in, because it does result in nuclear meltdown, and it isn't a comfortable, cozy sort of nice theatrical piece that everybody can go at the end, oh well that was nice. There are loose ends and repercussions that can go on for a very long time. So
did you have any readers who thanked you for writing, even though it was fiction, something that they could at least relate to and say, oh my gosh, yes, that the tensions between baby daddy and the resentment, and then also that freedom that comes from finally being true to yourself, and before you get hit with the fact that your new lover is a psycho for the character.
I mean, not everybody ends up with that. But yes, I have had that as well, and I've also had some very endearing things from women saying, well, perhaps I'll think about becoming gay because it sounds, quite good. If it doesn't work out with my husband, maybe I'll give that a go then. So it's been something that's made people think a bit more about their sexuality and realise that, well, in the space that I wrote my book and got it published, everything was more accepting about how the world was. But nowadays, in the last 6 months, I'm not so sure the world is as accepting and open. It's quite a scary time, I think.
It is. I'm thinking of that Harry Styles new song. I don't know if you're familiar with, but I have two teenage kids, and the end of the world and get used to it. It's just a beautiful song that just in a pop way.
Yeah.
That yeah.
I mean, I took my daughter when One Direction first came out. She was a massive, massive Harry Styles fan, and I was lucky enough to actually go behind the scenes at a book signing, one of the very first book signings.
Oh,
she
wow.
Meet him face to face, and she's got this picture that she hates to this day when because she's 21 now, when she was in her sort of mid-teens, of her red-faced and crying meeting Harry Styles.
Oh my gosh. And now he's this, solo artist who, if you listen to this top 40 song, it's a little intense, and it really addresses what we're all feeling. So I'm listening to it in the car as I'm driving out to this tournament with my 13-year-old, and she doesn't get it. And part of me is, taking it, interpreting in a different way. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around, this is Harry Styles, a One Direction kid. Not.
He was always pretty smart, though. I mean, he was always pretty
yeah.
smart kid, and I haven't heard that song, so I'll definitely listen out for it.
Definitely check it out. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So one of our readers wanted to know, what do you think were the main lessons that Alice learned about life? As I don't want to give away to the readers that haven't read it how we finish, but there are so many challenges and obstacles as she is going through these tremendous changes. What do you think she came out at the end with?
Well, I think the word change is quite apt, because actually the only thing that you can, I'm going all Buddhist here, but the only thing that you can rely on is change.
Yeah.
And also, I think something that I would love to get a handle on is, but you can't look for happiness anywhere but inside yourself. And if you're always relying on other people to be the source of the eternal happiness,
right,
you're always going to be disappointed, because I think one of Alice's major problems, and one of the reasons she drank, was obviously she wasn't happy with herself. So and when you sort of get sober, because I've drawn upon my sobriety for that side of things, and even when you get sober, you can still be sober, but you can still have the thoughts of an alcoholic. So you have to learn how to grow up, deal with real problems without having alcohol, and also realize, and it's the mantra which I was going to recite, and then it's just completely gone from my head, but about the fact that the only thing you can change, what's it, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and blah blah blah, something about the difference. But learning to realize that the only thing you can change is yourself,
right,
I think, and the only person you can rely on ultimately for your happiness is yourself, are the key things that I've sort of come to terms with, and Alice came to terms with as well.
Yeah. When we did our print interview, I think I had, as somebody that just really loves the memoir of genre, I felt that this fictional account read very much like a tell-all. And I think because of and there's a particular category that are called addiction memoirs. And there's something very compelling about them. I guess it's the narrative arc of, just showing obstacle and challenge after challenge, and how, despite so much being thrown at you, you will survive. And I think that your book definitely had that element. And so in our interview, you talked about how the novel, and we're also going to get to the big C word, because that's huge, how it was cathartic. So in terms of, as a recovering alcoholic, what was that process like to write it and sober?
Yeah, I think anything that, I mean, that's how things like AA work, is the fact that you're always having to bring up the fact and always remind yourself of the horrors of being an addict. So by writing it down, it was almost like doing my own step one again, is going through all that, well, step two maybe, we're going through all the horrors of the sorts of things that alcoholics can get up to. Yeah. Because I think one of the things that Alice felt, and any addicts feel, when they haven't yet got to the point where they've gone into a situation where they can talk to other people going through the same thing, is, right, I must be some kind of weirdo, some kind of real fruitcake to be doing these crazy things, and that isolates you further and makes you want to drink even more. So by going through this, it was another way of really getting it out there, and it's a sort of a grand step two, because it just reminds you of all those sort of terrible things, but also enabling other people to see. Because personally, when I was getting sober, the thought of AA was like, no, not for me. But I think a lot of people as well are very frightened by that, and actually admitting to themselves. But hopefully, if they read the book and think, well, I'm not alone, I'm not the only person who hides drink around their house, or make excuses about, actually, no, I wasn't drinking, I was using mouthwash, and can relate to that, and maybe therefore will take it a step further and seek help. So hopefully somebody would get that from it as well.
We have a reader asking, were you thinking of how your novel could help other people going through the process as you wrote it?
Yes, very much, because again, that's very much the spirit of AA, is if you can just help one person with their sobriety and stop somebody from actually taking that next drink and looking for help and moving on with their life, because it is such a wonderful thing when you do, then, yes, I did. It was very much a part of that.
We have another reader that wants to know, have you heard from any readers that you have helped that have,
on the alcohol side,
right?
No, I haven't, not yet. I'd love to. Like I said, there have been people that have contacted me about questioning their sexuality, or just coming to terms with a crap relationship. But yes, if there's anybody that has thought that they could do something about their addiction, having read the book, I would love to hear from them. But or not. I mean, but if somebody has got a benefit from it, then it would make it very worthwhile.
Wonderful. Because at the end of the novel, you can see how there is the themes of what you learned in AA, which are also very, which you see in the addiction memoirs, that and what makes it so compelling, and like, again, that you could feel, you could, this experiential base. The other, let's see, what, so many things I was going to ask you. Let's see. Have you heard of, I have another reader who's asking, has anyone read this book in a book club setting and asked you to participate, or have you dealt with any, a group reading it?
I was asked to do a talk about a month ago to the local WI, which stands for Women's Institute over here. I don't know if you have anything similar in the States. So it's where there's a great TV series about it, a comedy called Jam and Jerusalem, because it's in the past it's always been about sort of terribly well-to-do middle-aged women who sort of get together and make jam, do charitable things, and
Right.
Jennifer Saunders did a great comedy series about it, but it has sort of changed up a bit and is trying to appeal to younger people, and not just about knitting and jam making, but knitting, jam making, and something else. And they asked me to come along and talk about the book and open up to them. And it was fascinating because it was a very sort of middle class group of women who were it was quite daunting because I didn't know how they would react, and I was fairly candid about it all. And they were actually very buzzy afterwards about how it was great to be honest, and then people would come up and they were sharing little stories with me about either them or friends that they knew. And I'd also put an appeal out because the next book that I want to write, it involves somebody who has a mother that's got Alzheimer's, and I got about 6 people come forward and offer stories about their personal relationships with mothers or other relatives about dementia. So that was very encouraging as well. But yes, it was really positive feedback, and I don't think I got anybody that said anything unpleasant, which was nice.
Yeah. Actually, remind me to ask about that, about the next projects. But one of the things I wanted to address was, and something I want to just, commend you for, is you are a cancer survivor. And so much of, can you talk about how, I mean, speaking of honesty, how much of going through that led you to say, you know what, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to write fiction based on some of my experiences. To heck with what anybody thinks, or after going 40 years without telling people about your sexuality. Do you think that had somewhat to do?
I think I wrote the book when I was going through treatment. So I wrote the book from about a week after I was diagnosed through to when I ended my radiation.
Wow.
So it was something that actually maybe writing about something that was more painful than actually going through chemo and being bald. I mean, it wasn't a pleasant time at all, but about 12 months after I'd been through it, my father was diagnosed with a really horrible, aggressive form of esophageal cancer. And I have to say, watching somebody else go through it is 10 times worse than actually going through it yourself. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So, but but there's so many people that have been through the whole cancer thing and come out the other side. And I was very, very fortunate to have a wonderfully supportive partner, but also it was actually how I started out on Twitter. I found a group of amazing women around the world who are called Twisters, who are actually either women that were going through treatment themselves or were major advocates for cancer. And the support I got 24 hours a day. So if you wake up depressed and start to feel sorry for yourself, you get online and start talking to somebody immediately, and it was incredible. So getting that support from people worldwide and realizing, again, it's like anything, isn't it? When you realize there are other people that are going through something very similar, or more often than not a lot worse, it's a really helpful way of dealing with it and to stop you feeling so sorry for yourself.
Wow. One of the question that our readers always have, and it's something that I'm always, also as a, most of us at book club, everyone at Book Club Babel, I mean, we're writers as well, is how does a family react to your book after it's published, and for those who have read it? And even though it's fiction, what's their reaction to, just
oh wow
having stuff put out there. You know, there's always like, was that character a composite of me? Was so and so, you know?
Everybody was really great. My kids are great. My mum was great.
Wonderful.
And I'm still trying to get my youngest son to read it, but he had to get me the other day about not going to his first live music performance hundreds of miles away. And I said, well, did you read my first book? And he
There you
said,
go.
it's not my sort of thing. There you go.
Wonderful. So, you know, before we end, let's go back to you, that the second project. You know, what are we looking forward to with this next?
Well, that's the problem I've got at the moment, is I've got about 10 different things on the go, from a sitcom over here to a more serious book over here to a great crime novel over here.
Nice.
And as you probably know, as a writer, it's really hard after you've had your first book published, because you want to write something better and more compelling, but on the other hand, you don't want to, because what if it gets turned down? Or so it almost creates this. I have to say I'm struggling a bit to try and decide which one should I write and what's the best story. And so I sort of work a bit on one and then work a bit on the other. But I've got some great stories for my Alzheimer's book, and also for the crime novel. I was lucky enough to speak to both a forensic pathologist and somebody a policeman who used to work for the Met, who's dealt with a lot of serious crime. So getting all that information together again, but again, I'm scared about putting it on paper, because what if I don't get it quite right? I mean, some of the things I wrote about before I can draw on, and I know, but I don't want people to go, well, that's not right. Oh, she got that wrong. So it's quite a struggle at the moment, but I'm sure I'll get there.
Yeah, there's always that fear, but remember that for those of us who finish the book, and you know, at Book Club Babel, we only feature books that we enjoy. And
nice.
if we don't enjoy them, you know, we'll have somebody else give it a shot. and it's always the ones that suck us in with. We want to keep going, and we're friends with the characters, and we want to know what's going on. And when we ask about the sequels, it's because we really
I have been asked by a lot of people to write a sequel, because everybody wants to find out, well, did it work out okay for Alice? Is she all right? So that's something else that I'm, you know, which one shall I do?
Now, here's an interesting one. I think I asked this in our print interview, and this has more to do with the fact that memoir is just my absolute favorite genre. Is you have such amazing experience. You said, oh, if I just did my life, it would be boring. But I just, you know, we just don't, those of us who just love, you know, beautifully written memoirs don't see it that way. You know, everything that happens, and especially if the writer has a way of turning the everyday, and not just the everyday, in your case, some really interesting, not so everyday challenges to confront. Have you ever thought of writing memoir? Surviving cancer, I mean, my God.
Writing about breast cancer. I want to write a book about the stuff they don't tell you before you go into treatment, because there's a lot of stuff that you don't know is going to happen. And I think not the scary stuff, but just practical information with people about how to deal with it. I'd really like to do that. And I'd really like, that there's so much amazingly terrible things that I've done or gone through, that there's a lot of material there as well. But it's sometimes you feel, I don't know, it's not exposing yourself. Well, I'm not going to do that, but but you sometimes think, well, is that just an ego project, or let me write something now? Well, let's face it, we all want to be J.K. Rowling, don't we, and write the next Harry Potter. Wouldn't that be amazing? But a great fantasy book. So it's wondering whether you're writing a project that's a memoir because it's a really good story, or just because it's safe, you know what it is, and it's something about you again. And I'm not sure whether I feel comfortable with that.
Well, just to throw in my, 5 cents, that one of the things I appreciate about your style of voice is that the dark humor. And you talked about humor,
Yeah.
humor, and it was edgy. And I could, I said, oh my gosh, I would love. And now that you talk about the things that nobody really tells you about dealing with cancer, I could totally see your voice being that ideal voice to let people know, like, I didn't see this one coming. And, I know that for you, it may seem like it makes you vulnerable, but for us, it's like, if anybody's going to tell it, let Sara tell it, just.
Wow, that's really nice to hear, because I would, one of the things that I always, when I got my diagnosis for cancer, was like, and that I would have to go through chemo, I said, well, at least I'll lose weight.
Right.
But no, they
Right.
pump you full of steroids, and, you pile on the pounds. So you end up being, I think I said to you, like, bald, overweight, dark circles on your eyes. It's like spot the difference between me and Uncle Fester from the Addams Family, and it's just, so what's all this stuff they show on television then, where all these people are going through chemo and are terribly skinny?
These aren't, beautiful people. You're right. And I think that's what I'm exactly. And that's what I'm alluding to, that so much of your voice is, and both as an author, and is being brave, because you are brave. You're always brave when you put something out there. And there are many people experiencing that who won't say it because, for those of us who, are lucky that have never experienced something like the big C word, you do think, like, you in the back of your mind is like, oh, at least you get skinny. No, you don't. It does not happen for a lot of people. So there are different ways that I think that people with your brave and funny, witty, edgy voices can talk about. Are you kidding me? I have to go through all this shit, and I'm not going to look gaunt and, Hollywood.
Plain and interesting.
Yeah. It's like, what is this?
Yeah. And it's other things, looking back on it, like when nowadays, well, I mean, it was not that long ago, but people are very aware that sugar feeds cancer. So what do you get after chemo? Sweets and white bread, and
right.
Have another cake. And it's like, no, what's going on with the way people deal with this? So
right.
Yeah, I think there's something there. And now you've said that, I might do something.
Well, I think you should, because, I know that sugar's bad for you, but I had never thought about it in the context of cancer. And for those of us who are trying to do something to help our relatives or friends, first thing you think of is sweets, indulge, and it's feeding it.
Yeah.
So, I think you should do it.
Oh, I will.
It's your responsibility, Sara.
I'll say thank you to you when I said, no. Maribel, here you are.
Well, our interview has come to an end. Thank you so much for being with us and taking time. And Kristen Jacobson, who is our wonderful tech and business development person extraordinaire, thank you for making all of this happen.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. I see your lovely picture, but I haven't seen you in person.
She looks like it's all beauty, but it's beauty and brains.
Oh, I hate
that. I know. Don't you want to just strangle her? No. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank you too, and thank you for all the support that you've given me. It's meant a lot to me. So
You've got it. You've got some homework to do, so get to it, lady.
I'm right onto it right now. Forget going to bed.
Yeah, start tonight. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.